Welcome to the first of two sessions from the UK 5G security subgroup on 5G and security. For those of you who don't know, UK5G is the innovation network for the UK 5G ecosystem, and the security subgroups focused on the security aspects sitting under the trials and testbed working group. I'm Mark Hawkins, the chair of the security subgroup, a fellow at Kinetic. Been very passionate about 5G security, being involved in one of the first 5G security projects here in the UK. And I think security is really important. It's something people talk about in the context of 5G a lot. And I see it really as an enabler to realise the benefits of 5G, both in the telecom sector and much more widely across the UK economy and vertical sectors. So I just wanted to hand over to introduce, first of all, Francesca Saraville from Colt Technologies, who is the vice chair of the security subgroup and who has put together the fantastic program we've got over 2 days. So I'm just going to hand over to Francesca now, who's going to introduce the event and the speakers for today.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this session. I'm Francesca Saraville. I'm the Emerging Technology Director at Colt and also Vice Chairman of the 5G Security Group. Let me just spend a few minutes to introduce this session. We will start with Anand Prasad, who is the founder of Innovator and previous CSO of Rakuten, who will be talking about what needs to be done in order to deliver a secure 5G standalone network. We will move on with Spirit, who will talk about the need for a proactive security assurance as the network becomes very complex and the supply chain becomes diversified. Cisco will be highlighting the threat landscape across domain and the mitigation measure to address those threats. We will then have Colt CSO, Ash, who will be talking about the importance of a secure network fabric as well as security as a services for the B2B market segment. And then finally, we will close the session with a panel session moderated by Mark with a representative from NCSC and DCMS, who will be highlighting how policy will go beyond the compliances, but will also be used as an incubator and accelerator of an innovative security framework. So that's it from my side. I will hand over to Ivona to start the session.
Thank you, Francesca, and welcome everyone again. Thank you for joining us today. Just before we go into the main event, I have a couple of very short housekeeping announcements. So we've got the chat option and Q&A option at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if there's anything you would like to sort of privately message, please use that. You can also raise your hand if there are any technical queries, and we'll try to help. And also in the Q&A box, please use that to submit your questions to our presenters today and panelists. My advice would be, if you have a question to one of the presenters, please submit that question into the Q&A box, and also just indicate who that question is directed to. And during the discussion panel, please also feel free to submit your questions, and those will be picked up by Francesca and Mark during the designated Q&A time. So that's it for the housekeeping. So I'm now going to hand over to Anand Prasad, who's the CEO of Venover and former CISO at Rakuten Mobile. Anand, would you like to take over from me now? And feel free to screen.
Thanks, Ivana. I can share my slides now.
Yeah, please do.
All right, I guess you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Francesca, for inviting me. And thanks for the organizing committee for having me, and I appreciate everyone making time. So as introduced, I'm Anand Prasad. Today I'll be talking about 5G security Francesca was saying, I'll focus on the essay side, and that's what I'll try to do. And title I put from design to operation. The point being that 5G now is already deployed, and essay is already being designed. Some operators are even deploying it. I think Rakuten Mobile should be doing that as well. And here in Japan, Docomo, Keridia, and rest as well are working on it. So let's look at that because it's perfect timing for it. Given the time, what I have done is that I don't go into 5G standards. I don't go into 3GPP based security solutions. I dive directly into some of the key points that I think are important when it comes to 5G SA security design and operations. Yeah. Very quickly about my company, we focus, Innovator, we innovate together. We talk about holistic security mainly and some projects here. I'll just skip this. You're welcome to read that later, and some information about myself. It is already explained just now. Okay, so now going into 5G SA associated or 5G in general deployment and security aspects. Couple of things that come in play. As a mobile operator, of course, and even operations of 5G in general, it doesn't necessarily need to be mobile operator. You have to think about what is your overall consideration or policies associated to security. There are many different things. There are many different words that are coming up, be it zero touch, zero trust, the principles on which your network and security is based, be it defense in depth, security by design, or holistic security, or all of them combined together. Not just using these words as marketing term, but understanding them and utilizing them from practical perspective becomes extremely important. I'll just touch one or two things and then go to the following slides. For example, when you talk about holistic security, as you discuss a mobile network, you like it or not, it is connecting to your enterprise network as well. Yeah. So attacks can happen just because there are some issues, security issues in your facilities. Yeah. Someone enters your building without properly using the cards that should give the access to the building, and then goes into and starts accessing some laptops, and then can go into production network. There's a lot of relation between things, and so you have to consider quite a bit together. And when you talk about, in general, the rest of the things, you're also talking about considering security from the very beginning, taking care of risk aspects and things like that, which changes completely now that a mobile network is moving towards complete cloud native kind of network. Yeah. The other things that you need to take care of, and I'm moving a bit fast at these points because these are quite basic points to consider, are again given here in this slide. And believe me, although it doesn't sound magical or very high-tech kind of thing, these things given here in this slide cause the biggest share of issues in your network. So let me go through a little bit. So baseline security, when I say baseline security, I'm of course talking about hardening, but at the same time, you have to know about product specific issues and take care of them as well. Standard specific aspects, whether products that are coming in your network, are they fulfilling the standard specific considerations? Touch a bit more in following slide about that. And you have heard, and I don't need to say things, you have heard about networks going down just because of embedded credentials, and issues are coming up in news all the time. Yeah. And then there is a life cycle security aspect. And in there, I'm talking about security assurance, a broad thing, security assurance, from verifications going all the way down to pen testing, and then further on security aspects related to patching and things like that. And these are the places where when I touch the patching, when I talk about assurance, when you go to the cloud part of a mobile network, a critical infrastructure, it becomes even more interesting. Yeah, from very technical perspective. And then other things that that's often has been missed all along till quite some time. You have to know what you are protecting, and if you don't know what you are protecting, it's difficult to do that. And therefore, asset management becomes extremely important, and all the inventory information based on that that is highly important. And utilizing that, you will do the identity and access management. And identity and access management, different kind of functions, different kind of solutions coming in, they all have their own identity-based solution. How do you really combine them and then provide a proper unified security solution associated to identity and access management? You have to consider them from step one. And the same goes for monitoring and operations part of security. Now, when you talk about specifically when we are getting into the 5G aspects, 5G, I can define in a few words, is extremely modular. You are using very common protocols that are out there. You're using more and more APIs. You're using more and more open source solutions. And you have to secure all of these for a critical infrastructure with extremely high availability. High means you can go up to 5 to 6 nines. Yeah, you say 5 to 6 nines, but even then the network in general should be 100% available. So a couple of points here, let me touch them in the limited time. One is the optional and mandatory aspects. That is more from a standards perspective. What kind of algorithms you'll use? Will you use confidentiality or not? When it comes to 5G, you're also talking about privacy. Are you going to use privacy or not? And if you are going to use, how are you going to provision the keys for the purpose? Are you in 5G? You also have the user plane integrity protection. Are you going to use that or not? And again, yeah, what algorithms for that? Further on, migration, obviously, if you have a 4G deployment, you have to take care of a migration, and especially if you have a 5G NSA deployment as well, you're migrating towards complete cloud solution, how to take care of it and securely take care of it. Obviously, your HSS, for example, is now called UDM, and for very good reasons. You have your customers' credentials, and you also have their profiles being put down separately, yeah, when it comes to 5G. And then you're talking about roaming security part. In this case, as you might have seen the specifications, you have the SEP for roaming, but at the same time, SS7 diameter aspects will stay with you. But going on further, how do you take care of all the open source software that are being put in your network? A lot will be put in your network. How will you manage them? How will you run them? And how will you take the security of these things? When new issues happen, how will you identify and fix them? Yeah, all these factors needs to be considered from the very beginning, especially when you're talking about 5G SA. And just think, you should be in situation to modify your network at a very fast pace. And that's where your CI/CD things will come, where your teams will say that they want to continuously integrate, continuously deploy things. Now you have to take care of security of those things as well. You might get information that, hey, some changes need to happen. But as you move ahead, initially it might be slow, but as you move ahead, it will start happening at a very fast pace, and you have to secure them as well. So continuous vulnerability assessment, continuous security comes in place. And that too, from the moment the code is committed, you have to have the static test going all the way to dynamic, and all the other aspects being taken care of, including the policies. And then you come up with automation, you come up with machine learning and things like that as you move ahead, not necessarily from the very beginning. As I had mentioned, API more and more, it will come in picture, especially because you allow third party to access your network and different kind of services to be added to your network. You're talking about complete transport network and services as well. There's a lot of security aspects to be taken care of, and many different types of API coming into play. Since we are talking about edge computing, we are also talking about a lot of physical security as well. Yeah. Standards give you, in a sense, security even when something happens to edge compute, but still physical security to different level becomes necessary. And then slicing aspect. I think I'm already utilizing all my time, and let me go further to the next point here. Is operations. I'll just take 2 minutes and try to close it. There's a lot over here. The figure actually tells you more of a very basic perspective from security operations center point of view. But when I say operations, there are two different things in here. There's an operations part. As I touched in previous slide, your network is continuously being deployed and going through changes. Yeah, that is the operations part I'm saying, and there you have to take care of security. The other part that I'm talking over here is security operations center part. Yeah, as you are getting into 5G SA kind of solution, it is no more a standard SOC that you're talking about. It's no more just normal operations that you're talking about. I personally, I think in this case, you don't need to talk about level 1, 2, 3 anymore. It just gets flattened, and you have to bring much more automation in there so that you can identify threats, act on it, and even predict them. Yeah. So two different things in a very mixed way discussed by me here. With that, let me come to the end of my presentation. You're welcome to ask questions to me. These are some of the places where you can find information, all of them freely available, and then my contact information. With that, I end my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anand. Our next speaker is Alexander Gorkovenko from Spirent, who will talk about security assurance in 5G world. Alexander, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can you see my screen? All good?
We can.
Yes, lovely, thank you. So hope you're all well these days and you're enjoying this 5G security event. My name is Alexander Gorkovenko. I'm managing consultant working for Spirent Communications. We are a leading global provider of automated test and assurance solutions for communication networks, cybersecurity, positioning, and many other things. So today, naturally, we are going to talk about 5G. So, well, technical revolution is not tomorrow, it's today, and it's called 5G. It's supposed to be a radical leap, transforming completely telecommunication with those blazing speeds, bringing, you know, this ultra reliable, low latency, almost ubiquitous in the connectivity of everything. So ambition is very high to provide almost, create like general purpose technology, almost like electricity or cars as we know them now. So technology is able to service both consumers and industries. So whether we like it or not, this the goal is very high, and to achieve it, the network and technology is becoming more and more advanced. So network is getting more and more complex across all domains to meet this ambition. So we have new hardware, we have new protocols, new interfaces. So we have like insanely enhanced network virtualization in general. We have radio network virtualization. We have a software-defined network to support, you know, 5G core, edge cloud, etc. So we have, apart from this, we have different connected devices, and this goes much beyond typical smartphones and even IoT, which is a revolution by itself. So we are getting into futuristic world of connected literally everything. So many new applications of this technology becomes possible, and this is again much beyond typical traditional voice and data and video services. So one of key elements of this is 5G supply chain. The supply chain is coming under scrutiny, and I think now, considering we have this pandemic, it's a very good example which highlighted some weaknesses and problems with those global dependencies and also associated risks with supply chain disruptions. So the truth is that we have a, well, pretty small set of critical suppliers. We have past years of consolidations, and now we can see the risks of lacking of vendor diversity. And this is something which we have to think about much in advance. So we have not only issues with, so we have not enough vendors. We have problem with sufficient mitigation and continuity if needed. So good question. Will 5G be secure? And our fantastic high-speed 5G. So the problems we have to tackle are, we have a much broader attack surface. So we have all this new software, hardware, tools. We have not clear situation with those vendors. So multinational digital supply chains and dependencies. Let's think from the perspective of risks to critical national infrastructure. And this will supposed to be becoming completely dependent on this technology in the future. So the risk and stakes are very high. So in my opinion, it's very important that we ask those questions now. So what 5G is about, just in a nutshell, let's look at a number of key security enhancements in 5G. So we have, so I think we all know them, but maybe I'll just highlight a few most important. So we have this unified authentication framework, so supporting like same method for 3GPP and non-3GPP access. We have strong air interface security. We have this enhanced mutual authentication. We have enhanced user privacy protection. We have this SUPI. We have, again, enhanced cryptographic algorithms. We are aiming for using 256-bit algorithms, home control. We have enhanced roaming security. We have false-based station detection and many other things. And we might think, right, so by design, it should be really secure. It should be really robust. But the truth is that a lot actually is in our hands. And we at Spirent, we also work on solutions. We work in parallel with many universities and research facilities as they develop 5G. And we also work on solutions on how to test 5G and how to ensure this quality and security and efficiency. So I think this embedded 5G security features is not enough. And from our perspective, we have to test and we have to think about how we can ensure this active security on the go. So this is kind of a new breed of security assurance, I would say. And this is continuously testing security across the whole 5G lifecycle. So from development, deployment, and operation of every 5G related thing. So I would probably highlight three key areas. So be able to realistically test security performance and efficacy. And this is important to reduce risks and costs. Second, probably would be certifying suppliers and supply chains. So it's also aiming to enhance efficiency and also building trust for suppliers. And third, probably will be continuously assessing and auditing security in live networks to continue to improve resilience and also finding security issues on the go. So those different things is something we can call active security assurance, and this is where we can name it turning attack into defense. So we can see it as a set of software-defined test agents which will be deployed across the network in different places, in different segments, and they will be generating realistic attack traffic and emulating different network functions. So they can, as I said, dynamically put across this live network, very important, working 24/7 and intelligently testing different security scenarios. So we can pre-program different attacks. We can make a variability on those attacks. And this will be quietly working in the background and also probing every time and every minute without disrupting key services, making no harm to live systems, but continuously validating if your security policies are really fit for purpose, and for example can catch these attacks before they reach the target. So our systems, they emulate the attacker, and also they also sit on the defense side. So they generate traffic, they generate different type of threats, and they also measure what the system can smuggle through different filters and rules separating and segmenting traffic between zones. If once we are able to smuggle some potentially malicious or illegal traffic or signatures of malware, then obviously our system can trigger an alarm and run some third-party systems to stop bad things from happening. We can also inform SOC about something, something wrong is happening with the network. So just wrapping up, what we can recommend. So yeah, 5G can change the world, but at the same time, we all agree that it represents different security challenges. 5G can potentially be more secure than any previous network, but again, some things we have to take to our own hands and not rely on purely on the fact that there should be a fantastic, good, a very secure design. We've heard this many times before, and well, we all know that it never happened. So to deliver this promise of 5G, we might give a few recommendations. So first probably would be to understand the risk, which relates both to inside and outside your network. So don't simply focus on your perimeter security. Realize that insider attacks actually could be more common than you think. So your trust model has to be extended, reevaluated, and also go beyond vendors and also third parties. Understand also performance impacts of security. So what is going to be with your system performance when you're under attack? How your existing security policies affecting your services? Are they not like slowing down your services? Second very important thing is secure by design. So make sure your suppliers and your own developers adhere to up-to-date security standards, coding practice, product and system hardening standards, etc. So those things are changing all the time because again, we are all learning on mistakes. We as, I mean, the whole industry. So you have to keep pacement or ask companies like Spirent for help, and we will be more than happy to provide recommendations. So another would be validate suppliers and supply chains. So continuously validate your suppliers. So be sure your supply chain security is fit for purpose. And also this validation must be agile and continuous. It's very, very important. And another one is continuously test and audit your network. That's where these active security assurance come in place. So do it in real time, in live operation domain. You have to find right tools to do it without any disruptions. You can quickly identify risks and work out correct, sufficient mitigation. Practice this active monitoring. And again, this is it's a combination of generated synthetic attacks, synthetic attack traffic combined with analytics. And this would be really your best friends dealing with security of 5G. And last but not least, probably would be not to be afraid to think about out of the box and continuously innovate in cybersecurity. Because, you know, continuously do testing, do war game into your network, discover weaknesses, think about future risks, be creative, innovate, and think really how you can turn cybersecurity from an unnecessary cost to a value generating asset. So simply put, think in advance, include 5G security in every project, every idea, every business consideration. So that's my very short talk today. So thank you very much for listening, and please feel free to contact me directly should you have any questions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Alexander. And also please do feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box. Our next presenter, Pramod Nair, will talk about why 5G is changing our approach to security. Over to you, Pramod.
Hey, thank you very much, Yona, and thank you very much, Alex and Anand, for the previous talks you had. And team, if you think that Alex and Anand had a weird accent, wait for me to talk, okay? My name is Pramod. I'm based out of Ireland, and I work for service provider architectures for Cisco in the EMEA region. So the topic today would be, why would 5G need more security, or what are the changes from the security aspects of the 5G bring in, okay? Before we start, let's take a step back and see what are the architecture changes in the first place, and what that architecture changes allows in the business world, okay? So if you just take a step back, 4G had a A node B, which is basically a base station with radio kind of elements. It had a backhaul, which is then connected to a centralized data center, which would have the centralized packet core, the evolved packet core. And you would have roaming and interconnect, and then you have the GI LAN, which would then hit the internet. You can call it SGI, GI, whatever you want, okay? I'm sure you know, but I'm obliged to state it. When we speak about 5G, you have got the basic split on the backhaul itself, which will split the existing backhaul into front haul and the backhaul. And you have got some components on the centralized, on a distributed layer called as MEC. Now, the definition of MEC changes every week. And this week, let's call it the multi-access edge compute, okay? Some people also call it mobile access edge compute. Let's leave it to them at peace. And then from there, we have the layer towards the centralized packet core functions, where our colleagues Anand and Alex mentioned about the APIs, and you had these virtualized infrastructures and hitting out the internet. What has actually happened is that the existing functions of 4G on the base stations, call it eNode Bay, and the packet core functions, call it the centralized evolved packet core functions, those have been distributed in different layers in 5G, okay? And those are done to allow the deployment of 5G to enable certain use cases, right? The basic use case in 4G was voice and data. And voice and data is not going anywhere in 5G. You still have voice over NR. You still have enhanced mobile services in 5G. But there is also enhanced possibilities to deploy IoT and other healthcare and utility services, and also services like V2X, vehicle to everything, where standards are being made as well. IoT is not new towards 5G, but the deployment, the way it allows IoT to be deployed, the way you manage it, those all things are being flexible in 5G. To make that possible, this distribution of architecture was very important. Okay, now you will think, okay, Pramod, thank you for this. What are the threat surfaces? We are here to talk about security, right? So if you wanted one slider which exactly explains the end-to-end security controls, or sorry, the end-to-end security threat surfaces, this is the slide. And it's quite a busy slide, right? Because there is no two things about it. When we talk about 5G and securing 5G, the most important thing is to understand why to secure 5G better than 4G, right? So if you see over here, when we saw the previous slide, the radio nodes are being distributed. It is not just one node called as a BBU or a RRU, radio resource unit, right? The functionalities, the algorithms, and the way it is deployed actually changes. One of the methods is to have the distributed unit, the radio unit, and the active unit, active antenna unit, and the centralized unit all in one place. If you look back, 2G, 3G, and the first parts of 4G had got an antenna element, which was a passive element. Antenna was a block of metal with panels within it, and depending upon the beam width, you will have the gain. And depending upon the backload, you will have the loss and the reduction in gain. Simple as that, right? In 5G and towards 5G, that concept has changed, right? The way you deploy antenna is not anymore a passive element. It's an active element. Antennas now have got amplifiers. It's got a multi-input, multiple output channel. It's got an algorithm to change the beam width based on where the users are present. All those things are made possible to allow the use cases to be achieved. The use cases can be higher throughput. Okay, now let's see this word called as slices. And it depends upon whom you ask and what side of the bed that person has woke up, he or she will give you the definition of slice. Okay, for 5G, there has been a specific function called as the NSSF, Network Slice Selection Function, and also basic air interface protocols to allow network slice ID to be propagated to the devices. So there are methods how slice can be deployed. And why am I speaking about slice is because going forward, your use cases can be deployed based on slices. For example, you could give a specific QoS to the defense sector. That QoS can have a better encryption method, a better air interface encryption method, better QoS methods, so on and so forth. For V2X, things like vehicle to everything, you're going to have peer-to-peer communications. For example, you will have a slice allocated to an IoT application within a car, and that car is communicating with a traffic light. That is peer-to-peer. You have no control. You as a service provider or you as a utility sector provider have got no clue or no mechanism to understand what is the communication happening between those two peer-to-peer mechanisms, components, sorry. And here is where monitoring and things like those becomes more important. So coming back to the reason we are having this session, why is 5G changing the way we think about security is the use cases. The next way is how we deploy the components, right? If you see over here under 5G and the edge compute layers, we've got something called as virtualization. Virtualization came up in 1960s, guys. It's not new. 1960s, thanks to IBM. We were not even the liquid form, guys, honest to God. And today we understand what are the threat surfaces in virtualization. We understand what are the Spectre kind of attacks, memory caching, sharing of memory, the two VNF sharing memory. We understand the data leakage today, after 40, 50 years, okay? When we speak about cloud native functions, Docker, Kubernetes, guys, 5 years. We are just 5 years into those innovations. We really don't understand what are the threat surfaces. We can't presume or act to know that we know all the threat surfaces and we're here to solve all the problem. No, there are many problems which we don't know, and we're trying to learn by putting them into labs, doing some pilots, doing some proof of concepts, partnering with universities, having our big R&D team. The real problem here is that virtualization has got a lot of unknown threats where we as an industry should learn more about it, have some standards or specifications making it mandatory to secure those kind of communications. And cloud native is just one aspect, right? So when we say cloud native, what is exactly cloud native? Again, ask anybody, they have different versions, right? HC has specified what is cloud native. There's a cloud native function, CNCF group, foundation group, which speaks about cloud native. In one of the examples, let's say 1 year back, you're deploying a virtualized component, you're making an OVA file, deploying it on top of a hypervisor, be it VMware, OMVA, or a hypervisor, you're deploying a virtual machine. And that was virtualization for you. Guys, today when we say virtualization, it's immutable architecture, which means that I can have a piece of code, which open source components, I can deploy it wherever I want, on a VMware, on a KVM, on a bare metal, on AWS, on Google. I give flying doors about it. And how do you secure a cloud native function which is deployed on something which is immutable, guys? Okay, here is where we have to think about security. When we speak about cloud native, you're going to use open source components. For example, one of my codes on Packet Core has got Python 3.1, and 3.1 has got a vulnerability. I need to understand from day zero, before I deploy, okay, day zero is pre-deployment stage, whether any of my cloud native functions, any of my virtualized functions has got that vulnerability or no. Very easy to say, very hard to really make it happen, okay? So just in short, I've got just 10 minutes. I'm not going to boil the ocean. The point here is that many of the threat surfaces actually matter because of the use cases, okay? And two virtual functions sniffing at each other has got no problem. The entire routing protocol, the entire innovation of switching and routing is based on header packet, where the header came from, where the packet is going. And if two VNFs knows where the packet is going, that is not a problem. The real problem is when those virtualized infrastructure exfiltrate the data. Here is where NCSC, our cool guys from the GCSQ's public team, have come up with a white paper saying that look at the supply chain as well. Look at the user side of attacks, look at the supply chain attacks, look at the control plane attacks, look at the threat surface attacks. We made our own version as well. This has been made after talking with 35, 40 different service providers. So again, I just don't want to preach something, but it's very important when we speak about 5G, it depends upon the use cases you have and where you're going to deploy your functions as well. Okay, my friends Anand and Alex spoke about where you're going to deploy your edge compute functions as well. So that is very important because once you spread out your virtualized infrastructure to an edge layer, What is the problem? Okay, I take a function, I deploy it on the edge. What is the problem? The real problem is what kind of communication methods are allowed for those user plane functions, and what kind of access control is given to those functions. Okay, and we can invest 1 billion in security. None of us on this group can guarantee you that you're 100% secure. That never happens. Whenever a CISO or whenever a head of security invests in security, he or she is taking a pragmatic approach where he or she accepts a certain percentage of risk factor. Okay, that goes without saying. So when you go for edge compute deployment models and also the centralized deployment models, zero trust security is important. And zero trust is one of the most abused words in the whole industry. Okay, it can come down to different functions, but for 5G, it's very important that your employees, your part-time employees, the different vendors who deploy servers like Cisco, Dell, EMC, whoever it is, speaking of cloud native functions like Ericsson, Nokia, Cisco, and different RAN vendors, Altiostar, Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei, sorry, all the guys, okay? They need to go through multiple access control layers, be it multi-factor authentication, be it role-based access, be it having a separate a primary and a secondary authentication mechanism, and then allowed to access or configure the system, because you don't know the devices which they have been using are used in how many projects, what countries, and what sites they are visiting. Okay, so not to boil the ocean, you should have these kind of different layers. Okay, and this slide does not speak about any vendor. You should have these kind of layers. I'll just speak about one layer over here because of the time given to me, that is enhanced visibility and threat detection layer. Guys, if you want to really know what to protect, you should know whether something right or wrong is going on with that component. End of the story. Okay. For that to happen, you should have a right kind of visibility even at the encrypted communications without having to decrypt it. Each time you decrypt your encrypted layer, you're just making your security mechanism weaker and weaker. Okay, so for those kind of things, we have got some patented use cases where we understand any kind of malicious traffic within an encrypted component without having to decrypt that packet. Okay, so we have got plenty of use cases. You will see many, if you want to type Cisco Live Pramod Nair, you will see many blogs, you will see many kind of Cisco Live sessions. Have a look at it, come back and we can speak more about it. Okay, and if you want to know what kind of products are compared to all these layers, I've just named the product over here. The aim of the session is not to shoehorn the products down your throat, but to tell you what kind of layers are required and what are the comparable Cisco products. Okay, and these are not the products which you should mandatorily go ahead. These are the layers to make you sleep a bit more better at night. It's not going to solve your problem 100%. None of us can promise you that. It will help you snore a bit better at night. Okay, now I'm sure I've taken a lot of your time already. I've got my other colleagues over here online who would like to speak. I would like to give them a chance. If you have any queries, you want to go anything a bit more deeper, feel free to reach out and we'll go a bit more deeper. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pramod. We are now going to hand over to Ashish Surti from Colt, who's going to talk about how Colt is addressing security challenges for B2B. Ashish, over to you.
Ash, you are on mute, maybe?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just started talking to myself clearly, but I was just going to say, I actually said to myself, I was completely mesmerized with the message from Pramod, and clearly we've got a lot to think about as we embark on this 5G journey. My spiel is slightly different. I'm going to be talking it probably more from a business perspective, and also what actually is going on in the backhaul side. What Pramod speaks about is very much in the front haul, and also the utilization of 5G and the capabilities that will provide either in the medical sector, automation in terms of cars, any kind of wherever IoT might exist in the future. So as I go through my presentation, I'm talking a little bit more from the backhaul side. And also the security challenges from my perspective are no different than they have been for the best part of 50, 60 years since we've been on this technology roadmap of some form or another. So the only thing that I could say though is that the pace of technology change is clearly changing day by day with 5G. And I think the other positive side of the technology changes that we've seen over the last 15 or 20 years is if you look at what's happened with COVID, in fact, you could argue that the connectivity that we have today has kind of saved part of the world from a complete meltdown. And we've all been able to carry on with some element of productivity in what we're doing. But clearly technology change and impact is having a change to the way we deal with things in our society. Whether that's regulatory changes being brought in because of the privacy impact, whether it's because of fraudsters stealing cash and money, whether it's because services that are now being provided, and specifically if you go into 5G in the automation space, the criticality of that service being available at all times and the possibility that someone may disturb that in the future is obviously quite worrying. But clearly from my perspective and our view at Colt is that the advancing move of AI and ML, cybercrime, the lack of skills and capability to really understand this technology advancement and the ability to really manage the technical debt is clearly going to be a challenge for us as we further go down this particular piece. And I think the other guys have mentioned it and articulated it very well, that security by design at this point in time has never been so important. We've got to get this right if we really want to sweat the possibilities of what's ahead of us as well. And actually making sure that we've got the monitoring, the skills and capabilities to really actively manage that in the future is going to be paramount for us. So really, I mean, if you then look at the geopolitical landscape, the regulations that are coming in, ultimately, fundamentally underneath all of this is clearly a true business problem. How do you sweat the digitalization and the use of technologies like 5G and the hyperscale compute power that's available to us on a 24/7 basis, but making sure that when we're using that, it doesn't disturb the organization that you're operating from. I remember a great quote from a company that I worked for where the CEO had absolutely pivoted his view, and this is probably about 3 years ago. For many years working in the finance sector, most organizations felt that technology wasn't the heart of what we're doing. We outsource it for that very reason. Let somebody else worry about the technology. We will continue to sell loans and saving products. Actually, 3 years ago, the CEO said it completely the other way. Technology is the heart of what we're doing. It just so happens to be that we're selling loans and products on that technology platform. And therefore, it was absolutely at the forefront of the organization that cybersecurity had to be managed and it had to be managed carefully. Now, how has traffic profiles changed? Now, before COVID, you typically saw an architecture where you had a primary data center, you had offices, you had branches, and you can see by the thickness, and you hopefully can see my icon here, you can see by the thickness of lines, this is where we traditionally saw the bandwidth. And clearly, people had been working from home and had been accessing cloud services, but predominantly the volume of data traffic that we saw in Colt in our customer base was predominantly coming from the offices and the data center and that architecture. Now, what have we seen traditionally, and also traditionally the security process was to secure that where the red ring is, secure your offices, secure your data centers and the data that traverses from those locations. Now, in this last 6 months, we've seen phenomenal growth at the ISP end. So this is the last mile traffic. So we're now seeing huge amounts of traffic come from people's homes and actually directly hitting the cloud service providers now. So many organizations have traversed and changed their architectures rather than having all their bandwidth come back to a traditional data center and then back out again. They're actually split tunneling. So therefore, if you're accessing things like Google Cloud, Amazon Azure, Microsoft Office 365, why would you then come back to your traditional data center when you know you can access that directly and people are actively changing? So therefore, what this really means is your security lens and your security architecture has to change alongside that as well. We're now trying to protect right to the last mile into people's homes, onto the endpoint devices. So in that sense, again, others have already spoken about this already. It's no longer just about providing security at the devices. You're trying to protect it at the end-to-end stack. Again, goes back to that 5G example that we just heard of. You're now so worried about what's being talked about between your IoT device and that edge device that's sitting on the 5G network. Previously, you could kind of forgive all of that and just think about your end-to-end services, but now you're actually worried about the edge part as well. And actually what's going on now is that as organizations want to be open, they're obviously creating more and more exposed APIs to allow more and more devices to seamlessly connect to your services. And you're trying to trust those devices as well as they come and talk to you. Now, clearly this has been seen as well. If you look at the number of connected devices, I mean, most people have seen this graph in one capacity or another. I actually don't even believe the numbers that are here, because I think they're probably 4 or 5-fold more now that we're trying to do more and more from an internet connected device. But actually this morning, just as I was getting prepared for this particular meeting, I looked on my own router at home just to see how many IP devices have been connected to my home wireless network. I'm counting 85. That's from light bulbs, my security system, whether it's the heating device, even to things like my energy services as well. So you can clearly see the number of devices talking to an internet connection of some form to perform an activity is only increasing day by day. So what are we doing from a security perspective? Again, we're more focused on the backhaul, be it that we are partnering with front haul providers out there from a 5G perspective. But for us, it's business as usual. We are continuing to put security in the fabric of the network, and it's never been so important as it has been before. In fact, if you speak to our salespeople that are out in the at the front end talking to our customers, the #1 priority for a CIO, irrelevant of what services they're providing, whether it's the finance sector, whether it's the 5G sector, whether it's gambling sector, the reality is security is absolute paramount, and it has to be end to end. And what we've been doing because of that is we've been baking in various different security protocols and technologies into the fabric of our network, whether it's encrypting at the network layer so that the customer can encrypt all of the data that comes from their branch back into their network. We're also providing managed firewall services as well. And again, this is bread and butter to us now. You know, these are things that we can do on a day-to-day basis. Dedicated managed firewalls at the customer end as well. DDoS, I think that again is another topic of conversation for the best part of 15 years now, that if you haven't got DDoS protection already on your network, it's kind of an odd thing not to have embedded, because this is like a fundament that you should have. And then we've also got our cybersecurity operations center monitoring, as Pramod said before. One of the key things now is actually being able to monitor for the abnormalities that may be going across your network. You have to be monitoring for that, because you cannot wait for an obscure packet. You have to just make sure you're monitoring the end-to-end life cycle of what's going on. And now what we're also seeing is this concept of the secure network gateway. As things are becoming more virtualized, we also recognize that as an organization that putting security just in the fabric is no longer good enough. And as part of our strategy, and as we've been connecting cloud services together from our Cult IQ network, whether it's AWS, whether it's Microsoft Azure, whether it's customers' private clouds, one thing we're starting to see is that customers will also want security in the cloud as well. So we are now partnering with a number of security vendors out there to create that ecosystem. So not only have you got network security inside the Cult IQ network in the fabric, but also you can follow that straight into the cloud as well, depending on what your architecture looks like. And we also see that as people virtualize their own networks and become software defined, that you want to put security into the edge of that network as well. And we're actually doing some really exciting work on that right now, and actually working very closely with some 5G proposals as well to make sure that security, again, as Pramod said, right at the edge, making sure that security can be baked in from an end-to-end perspective. Some exciting times ahead. We've obviously evolved from the traditional security in the network to the cloud proposition as well. And we're following that trend and making sure we lead some of those activities as well. And you'll see that in some of our SD-WAN proposals. So what do we see the new challenges? I think, as Pramod and others have already said, the number of devices on the network only increases, which means the exposure increases day by day. Some of those devices are well written from a software perspective. Majority of the IoT devices that you see on the network today are very poorly written. Security was never seen as a forefront of their design capabilities and their software development cycle. So in fact, what that's doing now is exposing those networks out there. I think the API explosion is a huge value driver for businesses, but it also creates a number of exposures in that space as well. I think virtualization brings many opportunities in the security side, but it has to be done in the right way so that we can actually put security into the software stack. Network slice and isolation, I think this is going to become a huge part of a security strategy for many organizations. I use the COVID as an example. What you don't want to do is lock down entire countries anymore. You want to lock down regions and cities. That's no different to the network side as well. You want to architect your network so you can close off certain aspects of it, not the entire network, if you do have a security vulnerability or an issue with that. Multi-cloud and edge, clearly that's going to bring more challenges because you are now trying to integrate those cloud service providers and making sure you've got a consistent security model that kind of sits across all of that. And clearly the open network ecosystem means that you've got more aspects of your network that you have to standardize and move forward as well. But again, lots to be done in this space. I think there's some really exciting things going on from a cult perspective, but also from an industry side. And it's great to have forums like this where like-minded people can come together to kind of tackle some of these challenges head on. And before we really put our reliance into this new capability that's been built upon us. With that in mind, I'd like to say thank you, a little bit over my 10-minute slots, but it's been a real pleasure to be on this forum today. Thank you.
We are now going